Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. Normal 1.0. I used to be a normal person. That word, normal, we toss it around without really knowing what it means anymore. I had a remote job at a mid-level tech company, back-end dev, some cybersecurity contracts, mostly asynchronous. I was a guy who cracked dry jokes and Slack stand-ups. Comic relief, someone once said. I played the part well. But outside of that, I lived alone, ate microwave dinners, scrolled through news apps like it was a second job. No partner, no real friends, just ambient playlists and podcasts talking into the void. People laughed at my jokes, but no one ever called just a talk. Eventually, I stopped reaching out too. The disappearance. It started with deleting Instagram. No farewell post, no subtle story, just gone. Then Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. One by one, I erased myself. At first, no one noticed. Then one friend messaged, "Bro, you okay?" I replied, "Yeah, just need space." That was the last message I got. I didn't quit my job, but I asked to go freelance, contract basis. No meetings, just deliverables. They agreed. I picked up a few short gigs here and there. Back-end work, API cleanup, security audits, ghost in the system type of stuff. Enough to keep money flowing, nothing that tied me to a name. I canceled every subscription. No Netflix, no Spotify. Some weeks, I didn't speak out loud at all. But it wasn't depression. It wasn't escapism. It was a clean, methodical disconnection. The writing. Once the noise stopped, I began to write. Not novels, not blogs, just fragments, observations, ideas, questions no one around me ever asked. I posted anonymously in subreddits, obscure forums, deep web wikis. Things like, what if being forgotten is the only true freedom? What does silence do to identity? How many people would follow you if they didn't know your name? I didn't expect engagement, but people found me. Quietly at first, a message here, a reply there, then a thread I wrote. How to disappear in a connected world. Went viral in some digital underbelly. They called me normal. Not a name, a descriptor. It stuck. The cult, I guess. I never asked for followers, but they came. They started quoting me, reposting my words with black and white graphics. A few began wearing plain masks in public, cheap, featureless ones, and tagging a hashtag normal was right. Someone made a Discord server. Someone else wrote a zine. A girl med me. You saved me from suicide. I'll do whatever you ask. I didn't reply, but I kept writing. Then one night, I looped a Porcupine Tree song. Last chance to evacuate planet Earth before it's recycled. The sampled Heaven's Gate speech in the end, whether Hale Bob has companion or not is irrelevant. You must follow me and do exactly as I say. I listened to that last line on repeat, then whispered, why not me? The bank. That night, I felt a shift. Not rage, not chaos, just an impulse to test limits. I posted a riddle on a private forum. Obscure, symbolic, nothing direct. It referenced a well-known private bank and a possible vulnerability in its public-facing API. I didn't say, take it down. I just said, if the system is a lie, what happens when the teller goes mute? Next morning, their servers were down, ATMs locked, online portals frozen. The news blamed technical glitches. But in the Discord server, people knew. They spammed. Normal was right. Normal knew. Normal speaks, and the machine chokes. Now, I never told them to meet. Never organize a rally. No cult robes. No mass suicide. That's not the point. but they act and the world reacts. One follower tattooed my entire forum post on his back. Another renounced their family and sent me proof. And me, I sit in a tiny flat with blackout curtains and fiber internet. I type in silence. I press enter. And somewhere, something moves. I used to be a normal person. Now I'm normal. And they listen. Story 2. I'm a police detective, and I'm dealing with the weirdest case yet. Hello, Internet. I'm not saying my real name, but for simplicity, you can call me Oz. I'm going here because you guys seem pretty accustomed to this kind of shit. Being a police detective isn't usually too chaotic. Just dealing with legal nonsense, searching houses, and getting roughed up by drug dealers. Occasionally, I'll run into a drug cartel and have to fight for my life. But that usually ends as soon as reinforcements show up. But all that changed when I was in California, investigating a case in which a gas station owner alleged that he was harassed and nearly attacked by a strange man wearing a blank mask who demanded money from him. Not wanting trouble, the cashier gave him all he had in the register, but hid a bit of it to ensure the shop wasn't completely bereft of money. The robber didn't leave after seemingly emptying the store's earnings. Instead, he paced around muttering to himself, finally leaving just moments before the sound of police sirens filled the air. What kind of lead did we have? Barely any, but the man did come and go by car. So we followed that trail to its end. And I followed that lead as best I could. I tracked his movements through the traffic cameras around town, and he parked near a park entrance before vanishing, likely to change out his work clothes. I found the car where he left it and took it to the station with me. Forensics and I did a full fucking peel of that car, and not a single fingerprint anywhere. That car was, as the dealership explained to me, stolen. And the only fingerprints we could find were confirmed to belong to the young female owner, who was pulled out of it and knocked unconscious by an unknown assailant. Alright, that sucks, but I'm a detective, I don't give up. So, I cast my detective's magnifying glass over California, and I scrutinized for anything else to come up regarding the case. Eventually, something happened. But it wasn't a witness, a tip, or anything remotely related to my career as a police detective. No, it was a personal experience. At some point around 11 p.m. a few days ago, I was on a late night walk when I witnessed something strange. A blur of man entering an alleyway, and following him was a lean woman wearing a white, featureless mask. Suddenly, the details of that case that had occurred weeks ago came racing back into my mind. I turned off my songs and quickly gave quiet pursuit, but the alley was dark, and I could barely even see my hands in this rural place. So I turned on my flashlight and I screamed. Well, I've seen a lot of shit as a police detective, so it wasn't the kind of shrill scream you would get from a woman or horror movie survivor, but it was more like a very loud, deep gasp. I saw a writhing, shuddering man on the verge of death, being held down by two muscular men. One I recognized as that man in the gas station, but the other seemed slightly different. 3 women joined them. One was a younger woman I almost overlooked, another appeared older, and the leader of the group had curly hair. She carried a bloodied cleaver at her side, wore delicate white gloves, and was methodically removing the dying man's insides one by one. All of them wore identical, expressionless masks. As she clutched the putrid viscera in her grip, I heard something. For most of this paralyzing encounter, none of them had made a sound, save for the hoarse but hushed breathing from the 2 men restraining the victim. But now that the man's life had left him completely, the leader gently put her gut-filled hands in a position of prayer and began to whisper something, now that they didn't need to prevent his escape. The 2 men put down their victim and turned to me. Making eye contact with those psychopaths was the push my body finally needed, and I reached for my gun. The bigger the 2 picked up a chunk of the road and chucked it at me, and I narrowly dodged being knocked unconscious in front of these fiends. When they saw their ploy didn't work, they rushed me. It was a short alleyway, and with only a few seconds left to react, I frantically tried to reload my gun, which I somehow left magazine-less. But I had almost no time to watch myself, and I ended up spilling brass all over the floor. So in an instant's thinking, I managed to load 2 bullets into my mag and loaded. Bang, bang. I shot blindly, but accuracy be damned, they were almost upon me. Both shots hit. One of them was shot in the intestines, maybe even his lung, and he fell forward, wobbling on his knees like a scarecrow in a thunderstorm. The other was hit in the knee and fell to ground, before grabbing me by the ankle and trying to stop me from getting away. But a kick in his mask seemed to disorientate him, allowing me to get free and start running, but not before taking a single picture of the entire group and their latest victim. I turned around and ran as fast as I could, but this was a rural town, and few places were open to visitors at this time. But I saw my salvation, a nearby porta potty that was built much more sturdy than your typical dumper. So I ran directly toward it and locked myself inside. Only then did I call dispatch to request an ambulance and police, though it was likely too late for the man in question. We have to do that for legal reasons. At first, I thought that they had chosen not to pursue me for whatever reason. That was until I heard a slam as the plastic of the porta potty was rammed against by a familiar shoulder. I had no idea what was wrong with these people. They were pounding on the plastic with a wild intensity that reminded me of a clumsy, yet rabid and dangerous animal. Through the semi-transparent walls of the outhouse I was hiding in, I could see everything. The countless hands of my attackers, their shadows engulfing my small refuge, and every desperate attempt they made to break in. But the scariest part wasn't even this mob's animalistic grunting and hissing. It was what their leader said to me from inside that thin wall of safety. Hee, look what you've gotten yourself into. Everything came to a halt as soon as the police showed up. Here I was, looking like a fucking maniac, screaming about homeless psychos trying to kill me, locked inside of a porta potty alone. They did not find any body, no fingerprints, no camera footage. The only sign this ever happened to me was that picture and the damage dealt to that John. But you and I both know that chemical toilets being run down is a given, not a possibility. I'm feeling desperate, resorting to this place and asking strangers online for help. But could you give me a hint here? What were those people? It's probably gang/cult activity of some kind, but I'm completely stumped as to what I'm supposed to do here. Before wrapping this up, I have an unusual lead to share. About 2 years ago, a church somewhere in California was burned to ground by an unknown arsonist. Casualties were few, but in the basement, 2 pastors were slain brutally, and on the wall was a message, carved roughly by blade into the brick wall. We are chosen. Story 3. My airplane vanished mid-flight. I'm a first officer for a commercial airline. Been flying professionally for 6 years now. I've seen my share of unsettling things at 35,000 feet. Once, we had to divert mid-flight when an elderly woman started vomiting blood. Her grandson sat silently beside her while we coordinated with medics on the ground. We never did find out what happened to her, but nothing prepared me for what happened on Flight 237. It's why I'll never set foot on a plane again. That morning started normal. Clear skies over Seattle. We had a routine route to Denver. Passengers were boarding, and among them was a business class regular who was about to hit his 2 million mile milestone. Flight attendants said the airline had even planned a small celebration on arrival. But before we could take off, there was a pounding on the cockpit door. The interphone buzzed. One of the flight attendants called in, her voice tight. Passenger mid-cabin is freaking out, says he needs to get off the plane. Now. We taxied back. Turns out it was the 2 million miler, the guy who'd flown more than some pilots I know. The lead attendant said he was pale, sweating through his shirt. Told her, if I don't get off this flight right now, I'll never see my family again. That kind of thing sits in your gut, even if you laugh it off. Captain Phillip and I exchanged glances. Guy probably watched too many crash documentaries. I said, trying to shake it. The captain nodded, ran through a few quick checks. No faults, no warnings, no weather, all systems normal. So we departed. That was the worst decision we ever made. Our plane was climbing out of Seattle, chasing dusk. The horizon shimmered like heat over asphalt. I've flown this route dozens of times. Routine, familiar, but somewhere over the Rockies, something changed. Captain Phillips started twitching, subtle at first. A hand that wouldn't sit still. A whisper under his breath. I assumed fatigue. Long week. maybe some stuff at home. But something was off. Even in turbulence or emergencies, captains don't unravel. All pilots wear masks, fake assurance stitched together by routine and caffeine. Then Captain Phillips started muttering. At first, I thought he was rehearsing call-outs. But they weren't words I knew. His hands trembled. His breathing changed. I asked if he was okay. He didn't respond. His composure was slipping. Then the clouds changed. Not the color, the texture. They churned like boiling water, like something alive beneath the surface. Instruments flickered. Radios dropped out. Static. Then voices. Faint at first. Not interference, but voices. One of them said my mother's name. Another spoke in my own voice. I stared at the comm panel, paralyzed. Captain Phillip turned toward me, slow. His face wasn't wrong in any obvious way. Just off, like someone wearing a human's face, but not quite knowing how to use its own muscles to smile. We're almost there, he said. Where's there? I asked. He grinned again. Cracked. Empty. Where all judgment goes, my friend. Outside the windshield, the sky had gone black. Not a void. No. Stars still burned, but they were wrong. Twisted, like they were melting in slow motion. The plane wasn't flying anymore. We were sinking, like being pulled downward through quicksand. Faces began to appear outside the cockpit window. Not passengers. Not people I knew. People I'd wronged and hurt. They stared at me, not with anger, but with pity. And that look of pity was worse. The cockpit lights dimmed. Emergency backup kicked in, barely aglow. Captain Phillips stood up, unbuckled, and looked me square in the eye. Some of us must pay, he said. To leave this place, there must be balance. There must be a sacrifice. What place? I begged. What have we done? He opened the cockpit door and stepped out, but not into the cabin. He walked into nothing, a howling darkness, and yet it took him like he belonged to it. His body disintegrated. No scream, just gone. I lunged, but it was like grabbing vapor. I turned back. The cabin behind me was gone. Just more blackness. Then the radio sparked to life. A child's voice. No, my daughter's voice. We require a sacrifice, she said. You must choose. Choose what? I begged. The voice changed, bent, warped. Her tone twisted into something cruel, maybe even ancient. Your life or the passengers? It said with a sound of cruel hunger behind its voice. I wept. I thought of my wife, my daughter. I thought of the lives behind that cockpit door that was no longer there. And still, the voice demanded, choose. My hand trembled on the yoke. Me! I screamed. Then I woke up under fluorescent lights. A hospital ceiling above me. My wife beside the bed, clutching my hand. Later that day, government officials came to speak with me. There had been a crash. Flight 237 went down outside Cheyenne. Half the passengers survived because of what they call my bravery. Captain Phillips' body was never recovered. They call me a hero, said I saved lives. But I know the truth. I traded half the souls on that plane for my own. That thing won't let me forget, because when my daughter speaks now, I flinch. There's a weight behind her words, something just slightly off, a rhythm not her own, a tone that doesn't belong in a child's throat. It sounds like her, but it isn't. Nobody else hears what I hear when she speaks. Whatever it was, it didn't need my death. It needed my permission. It left my body intact. But I feel it moving behind my eyes. In the quiet moments. In the dark. I left that plane, but I also left fragments of my soul behind as well. And sometimes, when I sleep, I hear it whisper, "We never said you could leave." Story 4. People keep trying to get into my house. I bought my childhood home after years of waiting for it to come back on the market. I was ecstatic. I spent most of my childhood there and had many fond memories. I was disappointed when my parents put it up for sale after I went off to college, but I figured that if I got a good job and saved up enough money, I could buy the house next time it was put up for sale. I bought the house for significantly lower than the original asking price. It seemed like the couple living there was eager to leave, and when the time came to sign everything over, they did so with great haste. I thought that was odd, but whatever. I had my childhood home back. I now see why they were so anxious to rid themselves of the property. My childhood home, I'll call it a house from here on out, is a beautiful Tudor-style home nestled on a 2-acre plot of forested land. The back of the house is almost all windows, showcasing the deck, screen-in porch, and backyard. Aside from some furniture upgrades, everything looked as it did for my youth. Not everything felt the same. The woods on the property were my playground. My brother and I spent many days riding our bikes and building stick forts. For us, the woods were a place of wonder and fantasy. I didn't understand at the time why they now felt foreboding and claustrophobic. Maybe nostalgia clouded my memories of the place. Maybe I didn't understand then what lurked between the trees. My neighbors were also different. They weren't hostile to me, but they didn't go out of their way to welcome me either. In fact, I rarely, if ever, saw them outside of their houses. Their yards were overgrown, and ivy grew unopposed on their homes. I invited my parents and brother over for a welcome party, and they also noticed things fell off. About a month after moving in, I was doing some cleaning in the living room and noticed that a car was creeping down my driveway. The driveway bisects the property and is often used by confused drivers to turn around. I thought nothing of it and went on with my day. The next week, another car came down the driveway, but this time stopped directly in front of my living room window. I was just about to go outside and ask if they needed help when their car started up and darted away. This happened a few more times over the next 3 weeks. Always the same behavior. Slowly creep up to stop in front of my house, sit idly for a minute, then peel away. What was odd is that it was never the same car. I couldn't really make out what the car was either. It just looked like a generic sedan. About a month ago, things started getting concerning. One Saturday afternoon, I happened to look through the front door peephole and noticed someone unfamiliar standing on my front porch. I couldn't quite make out what this person looked like. Frankly, I don't even remember what they were wearing. I had been on the first floor all day and hadn't heard knocking or even a car drive up for that matter. I looked out the peephole for a few more minutes until the person turned around and walked away. They get into a car and peel off to God knows where. At this point, I'm getting a bit concerned that someone is casing the property, so I invest in a video doorbell system. Think Ring, but some cheap knockoff. I thought that would at least give me some peace of mind if something like this happened again. The next week, someone else showed up. Same thing, just stood there for a few minutes, then left. The week after that, they tried opening the front door. I was jolted from my nap by the sound of the front door knob jiggling. Scared the shit out of me, I'll tell you what. I looked on the video doorbell app, and sure enough, there was some random person vigorously jiggling the front door knob, as if they lived there and were confused that the door was locked. This shitty Ring knockoff didn't have sound or a way to speak with whoever was out there, so instead I called the police. By the time they arrived, the stranger was long gone. I gave the officer an account of what happened and let them see the footage from the camera. He had me send a copy of the recording over to the station so that they could analyze it and figure out the identity of the stranger. They never had any luck. A few weeks pass and life goes back to normal. I continue working on home improvement projects and a ton of yard work. Everything was as it should be, at least until 2 weeks ago. I had walked out into my garage to grab some gardening tools when I noticed a breeze. The garage had 2 windows, but in all my time living here, I had never seen them opened. If we needed to air out the garage, we would just open the garage door. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. The garage window facing the front yard was open, and on the dusty glass was a handprint. Fuck this. I ran back inside, locking the mudroom/garage door behind me. I called the police, and after what felt like hours, an officer arrived. I explained the situation and had the officer comb every inch of the garage to verify there were no unexpected guests. They dusted the window for fingerprints, told me to check my locks, then left. I spent the rest of the afternoon obsessively checking each lock in my house. Last week is when things got fucky. I had gotten pretty anal about checking outside before leaving, so one morning as I was preparing for work, I looked out the bedroom window and just about shat myself. Standing in my yard were 5 people. All of them were staring up at me. I walked over to my nightstand to grab my phone and get pictures, and when I looked out the window again, they were all gone. Damn, there goes my proof. I decided to call out sick for the day, because there was no way in hell I was going outside. On Tuesday, they tried my front door. All 6 of them jiggled the lock and hammered on the door. I called the police, but they had dispersed by the time they arrived. This happened again Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Each day a police call. Each day no result. The cops were fed up with my shit and stopped showing up. The dipshits thought I was playing a prank. Saturday, I saw some of the people in my backyard. Sunday, they had gotten closer. Today, they struck. I hadn't slept much in the past couple of days. I was too afraid that they would come bursting in while I slept, so I kept a near constant vigil. I finally crashed this morning. I don't know when I fell asleep, but it was about 8 a.m. this morning when I awoke to a cacophony of battered windows and doors. The fuckers finally made their move. One thing that sucks about my house is that the windows facing the backyard are big bay windows. This is great if you like views of the forest, but not so great if you are trying to sneak past would-be intruders. I counted 20 of them now, checking every window and door on the first floor. I don't know why they didn't just break the windows to get in, but I wasn't about to question it. I was confident that every door and window was locked. Part of my daily routine was lock checks in the morning and evening. I was safe inside given they didn't smash a window or shake a lock loose. I was safe but stuck. They've been at this all day. What can I do? I'm trapped in my dream house, and the police won't come help. I only have a few days of food left in the pantry. Not that I like going into the kitchen anyways. There's always one knocking on the kitchen window. Story 5. Mirror, mirror. I had been driving for hours, and it felt like days. I needed to pull off and get a couple hours of rest. When I saw the flashing vacancy sign off the freeway, I took it as a sign. $50 a night, no fuss. But the clerk told me one thing. She was pushing 90 years old, gray hair that was so frizzy it looked like she'd been shocked recently, and glasses that were held together with scotch tape. She leaned across the desk when she handed me the silver key. Mirrors stay covered. Don't take the sheets off. She huffed at me. Traces of her cigarette smoke linger behind her. So no mirrors? I asked. What if I need dash? Don't matter what you need, missy, she snapped. Mirrors stay covered. You'll be thanking me later. She pulled her magazine forward and began to flip through it. Room 3. To the left, sleep tight, she called after me, which brings me here, to this room. At first glance, it's your general slightly sketchy motel room. Burgundy bedspread, orange and brown patterned wallpaper, with equally atrocious brown carpeting, wooden dresser, and a TV that supersedes my age. Whatever, it was $50. I tossed my bag on the bed and walked to the bathroom to get ready to sleep. Sure enough, white sheets had been draped over the vanity mirror. Behind the door, a full-length mirror was nailed to the door with similar sheet draped over it. I stared at the sheets. Surely there's a reason why they're covered. Maybe the mirrors are broken, and the place is too cheap to fix it. Better leave it alone. After I used the bathroom and brushed my teeth, I changed clothes and settled into bed. It was the first time I had been alone since my brother's funeral that afternoon, so I finally let myself cry. All the feelings of the day flooded through me, and I openly wept into the cheap pillow. At some point, I dozed off. I don't remember even getting comfortable in the stiff bed, let alone falling asleep, but I had this eerie feeling of being watched. I dreamt I was in my hotel room, watching myself sleep. It felt like I was looking through someone else's viewpoint, because they moved closer to me, closer and closer, while I blissfully slept. My viewpoint then reached towards my sleeping form, and right before contact was made, I woke up. I sat straight up, breathing heavily and looking around in the dark, fumbling for the light switch on my nightstand. When the lamp flared to life, the room remained empty. I sighed. What a nightmare. I rubbed my hands over my eyes and down my face. When I looked down at my hands, they were caked in something dark. What the? I whispered and brought my hands closer to the lamp. Dark red coated my hands, and I could smell the familiar metallic smell. Blood. Oh shit, I yelped, getting up out of bed. I got nosebleeds all the time as a kid. I really hoped the habit wasn't coming back. Though the lamp was on, the glow was faint. In the dimness, I used my phone flashlight and stumbled into the bathroom and turned the light on. The covered mirror was waiting me. Okay, well, I'll put the sheet back once I clean my face, I say, and in one move I remove the sheet. I hold my breath, hoping there isn't a mess of shattered glass waiting me. And thankfully it's just a mirror, still intact, a bit dusty, but just a mirror. However, my face is quite the sight. Sure enough, blood is coming from my nose and the sticky substance is caking my chin. I take a washcloth and run it under the warm water, then bring it to my face to dab away the mess. I stare into my reflection as I clean my face, and I think, wow, I look rough. Dark circles hang under my eyes. My skin looks dull. My hair's frizziness is in competition for the hotel clerks. It's been a long day. As my face becomes clearer, I see my reflection start to change. My skin becomes brighter, my dark circles slowly fade, and my hair looks shinier, bouncy even. I continue to dab at my face with a confused expression. I must be so tired I'm hallucinating. I finish cleaning my face and rinse the hand towel. When I look back up at the mirror, my reflection smiles at me. Am I smiling? I touch my mouth and my reflection follows. I turn my head left and right, trying to track the motion in the mirror. That's when I notice there's a half-second delay against myself and my reflection. What the hell is this? I say out loud. The reflection doesn't match my movements. My heart begins to race, and I'm thinking I need to just go back to sleep when my reflection speaks to me. You really do look rough, it says to me. My jaw drops, while my reflection tilts her head at me as if she's studying me. Did you just... How did you know I thought... I ask, trying to look behind the mirror for any screen. Well, of course I know what you thought. My reflection laughs coldly. I'm you. No, you're not. Okay, I'm going back to sleep. I whisper. I grab the sheet and begin to place it back over the mirror. Wait. I pause. I wait. How was the funeral? It asks. How does it know I was... Am I going crazy with my grief? Does that happen? I say nothing. Pretty brave of you to show up. Considering the circumstances. It coos. I'm still holding the sheet, half covering the mirror. But were you brave enough to tell Mommy and Daddy that it was your fault their favorite child died? I rip the sheet off. That's not true, I yell. My reflection smiles at me. Oh, I think it is. You know it too. Wasn't he driving to pick you up? Because you and your boyfriend got into another fight? Wasn't he on his way to you when the drunk driver hit him? She asked, steadily watching my reaction. He wanted to come. I whispered to the sink. Did he? He wanted to be pulled out of bed to deal with his sister's drama again? Did you really have no other options? It demanded. If I had known, I stammered, if I knew he was going to, then I wouldn't have Dash. Well, it's too late now, isn't it? It interrupted. It laughed at me. I felt my hand start to shake. This was a nightmare, a horrible nightmare I will dissect in therapy this week. But a nightmare. Goodbye. I say, firmly. I place the sheet over the mirror and straighten it out. I rub my eyes, wash my hands, and open the bathroom door. Did I say you could leave? It says. I slowly turn back to the covered mirror. My heart is racing. My arms are shaking, and I can hear my breaths coming out in quivering bursts. I reach up to the sheet and tear it down. My reflection stares back at me, but this time it's the frizzy hair, dull skin, and dark under eyes. I let out a shaking breath. Just a nightmare. I laugh to myself. I turn to the bathroom door and notice the sheet covering the full-length mirror is no longer covering it. In my shaking terror, I must have knocked it to the ground. I bend over to pick up the sheet, and when I turn back to the mirror, I gasp. My terrorizing reflection is back, smiling at me. When I open my mouth to scream, its hand reaches through the mirror and wraps around my throat. I drop the sheet and begin to try and detach its hand, but its grip is too strong. I can feel the air leaving my body. It sees my struggle and laughs coldly. "You stupid, stupid girl. You shouldn't have talked back to me." Just then, my familiar appearance begins to laugh again, closing its eyes and throwing its head back. When it looks at me again, its eyes are red. I have never felt terror like this. "Your mind is a dark place, girl. I can't wait to tear you apart from the inside out." Its now deep voice tells me, "You folded too easily. Not only are you gullible, you're also weak." It cackles. Its grip on my neck tightens with each second. Lucky for you, I need a new host, so I'll make this quick. The creature starts to pull me towards a mirror. "No, no," I try to shout. "No, no, you're out of options, girl." It continues to laugh. I still have my phone in my pocket for the flashlight, and I fumble to get it out of my pajamas. Once I get the grip on my phone, I throw it with full force at the mirror. I watch my reflection's expression shatter into a million pieces while it screeches. Its grip releases on my throat as its hand retreats back into the shards of mirror. I collapse on the glass, panting and sobbing. I can feel the broken pieces slicing into my hands, but I can't move. My head is pounding, and I feel my nose has started to bleed again. Just then, I realize the pounding isn't in my head. It's my room door. I scurry out to the room and peer out the peephole. The hotel clerk is standing there, hands on hips and tapping her foot. I open the door slightly. "Yes?" I ask. She pushes past me and marches straight to the bathroom. She pushes the door open and sees all the broken glass covering the floor. "You idiot! I told you not to uncover those damn mirrors," she scolds. I'm sorry." I stammer as I begin to sob again. "What did it say to you, Missy?" she demands. It knew about my brother. It wanted a host." I whisper. She hands me my bag and looks me right in the eye. "You need to run, Missy. You need to go. The gate is still open and it will find you. You have to go now," she yells, shooing me out the door. "But what about you? Are you safe?" I ask. "Oh, I'll be fine." "It ain't scared of me. It's scared of you now. That makes it angry," she tells me. "What do you mean?" She laughs coldly. "It used your worst fear against you and you fought back. Didn't you?" she asks me. I nod. The only thing evil hates more than good is someone who fights back. "You have to go." I nod and stumble into my car, flip it and drive, and peel out of there. In my state of adrenaline, I made it home in no time. When I got into my apartment, the exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I passed out on my couch. When I woke up, there was no blood on my face, no bruises, no cuts, nothing. I have tried looking up the motel I stayed at that night, and it doesn't appear on any search. I also never got a charge on my credit card I used. Nothing remained to show any evidence of my time there. I avoid mirrors now, using only my phone's camera to check my reflection. I told my parents that my brother was on his way to me when he died. They cried and hugged me. They told me it wasn't my fault, and the relief I felt when they said that is indescribable. I've talked about the stay in therapy, and my therapist assures me it was just a bad dream about my fears regarding my brother's death. But I will always remember the hotel clerk's words, and I will never stop looking over my shoulder, and I will never stop fighting back. Story 6. I was stationed at a remote observatory when the skies started to open. Hi, I don't usually post here, but I don't know where else to put this. I was working under a research grant through an international observatory program. The facility was isolated, high in the Patagonian highlands, meant for long-term monitoring of atmospheric and geomagnetic shifts. Pretty standard science stuff, honestly. At least it was at first. Something's wrong with the sky. I've kept this journal as things have changed. The observatory isn't what it was. The sky isn't what it was. And I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to hold on to myself. If any of you are reading this, please remember me. It began with the disappearance of the birds. No cries, no feathers, just silence. Not absence, but a silence that pressed into the skin like humidity. The trees still moved. The rivers still ran. But the sky felt empty in a way that made the bones ache. I was stationed at a remote observatory in the Patagonian highlands, overseeing atmospheric readings and magnetic drift patterns. The grant was obscure, buried in layers of international collaboration. The work was real, but the purpose felt vague, like being given a scalpel to dissect a shadow. Then the sky began to open. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning, no thunder, just a soft recession of color. Blues dulled to gray, then to a matte nothing. Stars no longer blinked. Clouds stretched further than the curvature should allow. The heavens became vast not in majesty, but in depth, as though something had peeled away the ceiling of the world and exposed a void beneath. I sent reports. They were received but not acknowledged. After the 6th day, the satellite relays stopped returning signals. I was alone. Then came the dreams. Not images, geometries, spirals in impossible dimensions, echoes without source. I would wake with blood on my pillow and salt crusting my skin. The observatory began to shift. Corridors subtly lengthened. Windows faced new directions. Shadows cast by solar lamps curved in illogical arcs. I tested myself daily. Blood pressure, cognition, mirror recognition. I failed the mirror test on day 11. I found her in the western field near the seismic station. A woman, barefoot in the frost. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes reflecting a color I had no name for. "You watched it too long," she said. Her voice was like a tuning fork, not echoing, but resonating within. I asked her name. "It left me," she replied. She never entered the facility, but I would see her just beyond the glass, always slightly distorted, as if the curvature of the building warped around her. On day 15, she placed her hand on the main dome. The glass blistered. "The sky is a shell," she said, "and it's begun to hear you." I stopped using the radios. The instruments still functioned, but the readouts had changed. Atmospheric pressure no longer correlated with altitude. Magnetic north fluctuated hourly. One monitor displayed a new unit. Delta Tau, a symbol I hadn't programmed. I asked her what it meant. "It's not measuring time," she said. "It's measuring remembrance." I slept less. The walls began to soften, not physically, but in my certainty. Some days I couldn't recall how many rooms there were, or which hallway led to the lab. I mapped it daily. The inconsistencies multiplied. Then one morning, I found a stairwell that hadn't been there before. I descended. The air grew wet, fragrant with minerals and old dust. The stairs spiraled inward, narrowing. When I emerged, I was beneath the observatory, but somehow outside. The sky loomed directly above, and it was open. I saw it, not with my eyes, but with a witnessing that bypassed vision, a presence vast enough to erase thought. It did not speak. It did not move. It noticed. In that moment, I felt the weight of all forgotten moments in human history. The lost languages, the unburied bones, the screams that never reached ears. It was not a god. It was a memory of negation, the will of all that has been left unwitnessed. It had been watching long before I arrived. I stumbled backward. The sky shivered like flesh. I awoke on the observatory floor, alone, or not quite. She was there. Her eyes no longer shimmered. They were matte, lifeless. "You brought it too close," she said. I asked what I'd done. "You made it aware that it was being watched." She wept, not from sorrow, but from dissolution. Her form began to blur at the edges, as though memory could no longer sustain her. She reached for me. "Do not forget me. That's all it needs. That's all it wants." I'm writing this now on the final page of the observation logs. The instruments have stilled. The observatory is silent, but the sky is alive. It moves when I do not look. It grows when I try to forget. It is hollowing the world not with force, but with observation. If someone finds this, remember me, please, before I, too, become unwitnessed. Story 7. I returned to videos from my grandfather. I wish I hadn't. Once again, there are scratching noises coming from the attic. Even though I was just up there and confirmed that nothing is in fact there, at least nothing big enough to be making scratching noises like that. I'm in my grandfather's old room. I say old because he died a week ago, and I'm typing this post for all of you now. I know most of the posts on here, with good reason, are requesting advice, help, or just putting out a dire warning. But honestly, I just want to tell someone about all of this. It's freaky and traumatizing, but undeniably interesting. My grandpa and I were close. Not as close as we should have been, perhaps. But in this time where the regular church/family structure is slowly fading away, no opinion on that. It's definitely impressive that a teenager would voluntarily go visit his grandparents at least once a week in high school, and then as often as he could in college, substituting with checkup calls. He had a big effect on my life, and I miss him dearly. Now I just wish I'd asked a lot more questions. After days of funerals, lawyers, and all the like, my dad and I agreed that I could live at the old house if I started to work towards paying off some old debts. I'm not going to go into specifics, but it was the deal of a lifetime. Really, I was going to own land and a paid-off home if I stayed current for the next few years. Apparently, Dad has as much info as I did. He just assumed it was an old house with regular belongings and that my grandpa had leftover mortgage payments or something like that. All right, Wyatt, just sign here and I'll mail it. I'm not sure when his representative will come, but it shouldn't be too long. That's not my real name, and from here on out, just assume any name you read is fake, because it is. I've got enough trouble to deal with now, and I don't need to add stalking to that list. Why isn't it just his lawyer? He handled all the other estate stuff. I don't know. I guess Dad wanted a separate guy for his business accounts or something. I'll call you later. With that, Dad left and dropped the form off in the mailbox. I forgot to mention that Grandpa owned an antique/pawn/swap meet store. It bought, sold, and exchanged all kind of items, and it was really interesting to take a walk through. For now, my uncle is keeping an eye on it, but it's not open yet. I watched Dad walk down the fading brick walkway, stooped down, placed the envelope in the box, and flicked the flag up. He got in his car and drove off, but as I was still looking out the window, I saw the flag suddenly flick back down. It was cloudy, sure, but all of a sudden the clouds became much thicker and grayer. The wind began to howl, and the lights in the house flickered. Down the road, where I had just seen Dad's taillights disappear, I saw headlights. It was clearly a very nice car. Matte black, tinted windows, and it just sounded expensive. But I don't even think it had a brand. Must have been custom or something. But I was sure I'd never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again. It rolled down the street and came up the driveway. The left back seat flung open. Out stepped a tall, pale man in a very nice, but very loose, charcoal gray suit. His hairline was thinning, but still his hair was slicked back, and there was no facial hair on his gaunt face or under his bony nose. Everything about him was alien. The way he walked, the way his arms swayed, his unmoving neck and his eyes. His cold, powerful eyes looked like they could see through a brick wall, and as they were hiding such a vast repository of knowledge, yet they still looked tired. I opened the door, as unnerving as he was. I didn't think he was dangerous, and he carried himself like someone who belonged there to do business. As he got closer, I barely saw the chain of a necklace almost concealed beneath his collar, and I finally took note of the classy leather briefcase he was holding. "Hello, Samuel. Long time no see." He pronounced it Samwell. That was my grandfather, and that wasn't how his name was pronounced. He set the case down on the porch table and opened it for a moment to pull a paper out. Looking at it, I realized it was a paper I just signed, and that surely must still be in the mailbox. "Oh!" His voice was a mock surprise, but I could tell he enjoyed what he had just read. He reached his arm out to me. "Hello, Wyatt. Sorry for confusion. My name is John, but you can call me Mr. Cavey." Those were the real names he told me, but something tells me they were fake to begin with. I shook his hand, which had a surprisingly firm grip for such cold, bony fingers. "It's no problem. May I come in?" "Yes, sure. I assume you knew Grandpa?" "Yes, I was a representative for him." "Representative for what?" He ignored me and sat down at the table. After he entered, the lights flickered once more, and I was sure I heard a short, earthy hum, similar to what might emanate out of crystal from somewhere. Okay, do you have a driver's license or some other form of identification? What? I need to verify you. For what? Then he even looked confused for a second. Oh, sorry, sir. I didn't realize Samuel hadn't told you so much. I sat down and he went over the paper I had just signed stating I wished to take over my grandfather's role as curator of the house, which seemed an odd name because it wasn't a museum or something like that. And then Mr. Cavey went over a very long contract. Many details aren't important, and really were just bland legal jargon, but the main gist of it all was that Mr. Cavey and his associates were Grandpa's main creditors. He explained that he had fallen behind on some of his work, but he was still an important and valuable client, so they allowed him some grace. If I proved myself in clearing his debts, then the claim they had to the house and its assets would be resolved, and I could possibly see some of the same benefits that my grandfather had, though he didn't explain further with the indication that this would be some time away. After that, he went back to business, checking my driver's license, confirming the last 4 digits of my social, and going over a credit report on me, despite all of this information being in his briefcase. It was clear he hadn't even glanced at it yet. He signed off on a lot of things and wrote down some notes here and there, but finally, he only asked me for one signature. I held my hand out for his pen. He smiled grimly. Oh no, sir, we're very traditional. He reached up to the top of his briefcase, and I heard the loosening of a buckle. He presented an ornate and beautiful fountain pen. It had a thick granite cap, and the rest of it was made from silver, and centered on the handle was a dark black jewel. I thought it might have been an onyx stone or obsidian or something, but I wasn't sure, and I'm certainly not sure now. I should have looked over everything again, and I should have asked more questions, especially about what the debts even were. But I wanted that house, and I still do. If I had to go back now, I think I still would have signed it, but yeah, I would have asked a lot more questions. He took off the cap and circled where I was to sign. I didn't argue, and I think I was a bit starstruck by the pen itself, and I signed. I remember carefully gliding the pen along the line, being satisfied that my signature actually looked official, and lifted my hand up to realize the jewel on the pen had become red. I felt faint. Mr. Cavey stood up and shook my limp hand. He placed a worn envelope on the table and made his exit. Well, Wyatt, I'm very pleased to have met you, and I look forward to doing business with you for the foreseeable future. Good luck. After he left, I got up to get a drink of water and eat something to get my head right. I made my way out to the mailbox, still recovering just a bit, and down the road I saw his headlights one last time. I looked in, and there was nothing there. I'm not really surprised after everything else that happened, but still, it was hard to wrap my head around the form teleporting into his briefcase. I opened up the envelope he had left. It smelled like onions, and inside was a receipt book. I tried to open it, but I could only get to the first page. It had a sticky note that said, "Check the attic." I pulled it off, and below was a log where my grandfather had rented a VHS tape from a local video store. I know, a bit of a lackluster turn from everything else that had just happened. But yeah, it was a VHS rental that was 12 years past due. Again, I tried to go to another page, but I physically could not separate the pages. It's hard to explain, but there were definitely other pages. It wasn't just a piece of cardboard with one page attached to it or something like that. I felt the ridges of the pages and even some leeway, but I felt immense pushback when I tried to separate them. I tried one more time with some more force, and the pages separated just a hair, but began to let out this horrible electronic wailing sound, and I dropped in surprise. I didn't try again after that. I made my way upstairs and rummaged around in closets for 20 minutes until I found the attic key, a really long Allen wrench. And then I had to recover myself again after the attic latch released moldy dust onto me and my open eyes. Above, I was immediately taken aback by how large the attic was. Do you know that scene in Harry Potter where they're in the room of requirements or whatever, and there's all that mystical junk lying around? It was a lot like that, except on a smaller scale, and a lot of it was stuffed into cardboard boxes. I saw tribal relics, old technology, stuffed animals, and lots of old clothes. I mean, like a metric ton of old clothes. Grandpa had no reason to hold on to them. Grandma had passed years ago, but they weren't even women's clothes. I admit this is not important, but still, there's a ridiculous number of clothes up there. Anyways, near the entrance was a machine that resembled an ATM. I walked up to it, blew off the dust, coughed for a few minutes, and powered it on. It flashed my grandpa's name for a second, but then it must have updated suddenly, and it read my name out. All it gave me was a simple welcome before it requested the receipt book to be validated. A slot at my waist level suddenly clicked open, and I slowly inserted the book inside. After some digital humming, I heard a hard chunk, and it spat the book back out at me as it printed a small receipt. Ripping it off, I read it to see that it was directions for getting through the mess behind me to the right box. Box number 268. It had a line for directions underneath this information, and it said I needed to retrieve the tape and return for further instructions. I was quickly aware that I wasn't alone up there. I heard quick but heavy shuffling. Something would be knocked over. But when I turned to look at the disturbance, there was nothing there to have caused it. And, in general, I felt the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. Of course, at the time, I only had reason to believe the worst-case scenario was a rabid raccoon I would have to wrestle with. And so I trudged on following the specific directions laid out for me, right at the multicolor rack of clothes. Continue forward at the diverse helmet. When you hear an analog version of Beethoven's Fifth up ahead, turn left immediately and don't say a word. This part was in bold. And finally throw the faux bear skin rug off, and there's the box. 268 was spelled out in Sharpie. It was a box of VHS tapes. I hadn't heard any noises in quite a while. So I made myself comfortable and started sifting through and stacking the tapes in front of me. It was nice, rummaging through old memories and absorbing little pockets of nostalgia here and there. I found a VHS copy of Rom and Carrie, Season 2 of Little Maestro, and even a tape of Galactic Assault, some young favorites of mine. I also found some porno tapes. I opted to throw those into a nearby box of old socks, except for one titled Spicy 17th Anniversary, which was home filmed. I scratched out the name and snapped that one, partly a favor to Grandpa, and to myself. I tossed the remains and kept sorting. I actually found some other cool VHS tapes I didn't even know he had. There was a copy of The Matter, a cult classic horror movie, a director's cut of Bear in the Deep, a popular Atlantis fantasy movie, and even a tape that said it had news recordings of the Watergate scandal and of Nixon leaving office. There was also another porn tape I threw away. However, at the very bottom of the box, there was a final tape that had a rental receipt rubber banded to it. I picked it up, but there was no name on it. Upon further inspection, I saw that the plastic casing of the VHS had many small intricate carvings all over it. I thought it seemed really cool, and at the time, I assumed it must have been a limited edition version of some cult or voodoo magic-themed horror movie. It sends a shiver down my spine, and I am forced to shake myself when I recall that I planned to watch the tape before I returned. But since I wasn't about to root around that attic for a VHS player, I decided to just head straight to the store. The directions on the receipt said to simply reverse the earlier directions and trail my way back to the entrance. Once again, I followed them to a T, this time carrying the box with me, but when I heard the analog track of Beethoven's Fifth, it stopped for a moment, and I heard a robotic voice call out to me, "Hello." I rushed away after hearing that, and the music returned, but it was sped up and much louder. I just barely heard it echoing when I reached the entrance and rushed back down the stairs. I shut the latch, but as soon as I did, I heard scratching noises coming from it. I knew where the rental store was. I guess we once had a few in town. We may even have had a Blockbuster at some point, but they had slowly died off, and now there was just one left. An old high school friend of mine works there now as the cashier. He sells weed out of it, but the owner doesn't mind because, as Greg tells me, the owner's just laundering money with it for a local crime ring. And so, the store stays open despite, being far past the worldwide adoption of DVDs and Greg selling his wares in full view of the security camera. The only customers coming to the store are a group of hoodie-clad young men, returning a rental, and Mr. Rimmer, who keeps renting the same copy of Love on the Tides every single week. Greg tried to just sell him the copy a few times, but he quickly understood that Mr. Rimmer was just lonely and enjoy Greg's stone company. I parked in the cracking thrall of faded asphalt. The tall mart next door was busy, and upon entering the store, I saw that Greg had made himself a lunch of Tall Mart brand deli items. I'll be honest, I've done it too. Pretty cheap lunch for some good food, maybe give a shot. Anyways, I laid the VHS on the counter, and even Greg was quickly confused by it, and then annoyed. Bro, why are you bringing me this shit? It's 12 years past due. Look, it was first up on working through Grandpa's stuff. Dude, I think management has changed twice since this was rented. Just keep it. I guess the owner saw that someone other than Mr. Rimmer was actually bringing a VHS in and, out of curiosity, came down to see what was up. Greg, something wrong? Wyatt's grandpa died. He's trying to return a VHS for him. The owner smelled like sweat and cigarettes. Apparently, you don't get used to it because I saw Greg turn his nose up a bit as well. You brought in a 12-year past due tape? Is there a fee or something? He just gave me a deadpan, disappointed look. I guess it was a bit dumb, but seeing on a receipt book, I just assumed it was supposed to finally be returned. After all, a rental would definitely be considered a debt. The owner turned it over a couple more times, scrutinizing it. What movie even is this? I don't know. I assumed, based on the symbols, that it was some kind of culty horror movie. Yeah, maybe. Let's go look. Greg turned the front sign to closed, and we made our way into the back room. There, Greg pulled a record book, and we tried sifting through it to find this tape. We found it, with its line all blacked out. Huh. Apparently, this was new to the owner as well. Alright, well let's just play it to see what's on it. Greg, you think you could take the trash out while I get the VHS player hooked up? Also, he passively flicked his hand at me. Could you get the receipt? We left it on the counter, and I want to look at it again. We both got up from the decrepit and lumpy couch and did as we were requested. I followed Greg out back and was thoroughly surprised that his lone pot head frame could swing the heavy bag of trash back and forth and then land it perfectly into the next door Chinese buffet's dumpster. The sign that said, "Restaurant Trash Only." We walked back inside and stood at the counter, talking about the house and about Greg's side hustle. But we soon heard something from the back room. It sounded like screaming. We ran back behind the counter and threw open the door, entering the back room. To the immediate left is a wall, and the rest of the room is to the right. The television was facing the back of the room, and it was one of the large cube-shaped ones, so we couldn't see what was on the screen. What I thought were the owner's screams were actually emanating from the TV. There must have been thousands of voices wailing, laughing, crying, and chanting dark, indecipherable messages. Wind was rushing around the room, being sucked like a vacuum into the screen, and against the back wall there were odd shadows being cast by bright, sickly light. It was as though the screen itself were gone, and a portal had opened up, with figures collecting just beyond the veil. The owner was standing there, clothes flapping and arms lying limp at his sides. His mouth was agape and his eyes were struck open. It's so beautiful. Oh, God! Suddenly he began howling, and before us his skin began to melt off his body, and was sucked through. Quickly his whole body, blood, organs, bones, and all separated themselves from him, and he was gone. All that was left was the food in his bowels. It looked like McDonald's and an artificial hip. A sound like lightning being torn in half screamed across us, and the light closed off as the portal closed. The player spit the tape out. There was such an awful silence after that. Greg and I just stared at the spot, obviously in shock. I mean, how else were we supposed to react? Finally, I began to move back into the room, and Greg inched forward with me. I rounded the corner and found that neither the TV nor the VHS player showed any signs of being involved in the inexplicable horror that had just unfolded. I turned over and found the tape lying sideways behind the coffee table. I hovered my hand over for a second, and I even dropped an old fry from the floor on it first. No effect after I lightly tapped it with the back of my arm. I picked it up, Greg, and I stared down at it. The symbols on the sides had turned bright red. What do we do? Hearing another person's voice after all that, and all the silence shook me for a moment. I thought for a second, but the thoughts just wouldn't form. What could the police do? What could anyone do? It certainly didn't seem like he was going to be in any savable state. even before his body had disintegrated. That tape had affected his mind. The only thing that could have possibly been done for him was to watch the tape ourselves and try to figure it out, or I guess to go in after him. And we sure as hell weren't doing that. I didn't even know the guy in Greg had always said he was kind of a dick. Greg walked over, picked up the replacement hip, and turned back to me. Listen, I'm going to throw this away, and then I'm going to clear the security footage. If anyone asks, let's just say he skipped town. I didn't really have any other ideas, so I nodded. After I finally got my legs moving again, I quickly walked out the door and sped all the way back to the house. As I sat in the kitchen, eyes wide open, trying to ignore the sound of distant scratching, I went over everything in my head over again. I felt like a character in a horror game who finally realizes they are in a supernatural, deadly situation, and that things are far beyond their knowledge and control. I realized I hadn't locked my car door, and I stuffed my hand into my pocket to retrieve my keys. But as I did so, my hand ran over crumpled paper. I pulled the slip out with my keys, pressed a button to lock my door, and then looked over it. It was a receipt that the machine in the attic had returned to me. A worried feeling suddenly washed over me when I reread the line, retrieve the unmarked tape, and return for further instructions. I got up and made my way upstairs. It took a while to get myself to do it, but after I smacked the door with a latch key a couple of times and the scratching stopped, I opened it up and slowly climbed upstairs. Poking my head through, I really felt like I was in a horror game. There wasn't anything waiting to rip me in half on the other side, thankfully, but I still didn't feel good up there. The fifth was still playing in the distance. I walked back over to the machine, which somehow had another layer of dust. I blew it off, and as I stood there coughing once more, I made a note to start donning a face mask and arming myself with a keyboard cleaner. My heart sank as I pressed a button to bring the machine back to life. It said clearly, "Do not play the tape. Deposit tape here and then store it." I did as I was instructed, and the machine began to whir for a while. As I waited, I noticed that the attic layout had clearly changed. I don't mean something got knocked over. I mean everything was moved around. Even the egregious amount of old clothes seemingly walked around on their own and ended up planting themselves in places that seemed semi-organized. Finally, I heard another deep chunk and turned back around to find the tape waiting for retrieval. It was no longer glowing on the sides. I felt tired, and I still do. I just put the tape down beside the machine and covered it with a shirt. I headed back downstairs and locked the latch again, but I jumped as I heard something slam into it, followed by more scratching. That was yesterday. I remember lying around the house for the rest of the day with all the lights off. It was surprisingly easy to brush off the manager's death. After all, he was aiding a local crime ring and selling drugs, and not like pot. I mean, the life-ruining ones. Also, Greg told me he was kind of a dick. But really, I was bothered by the situation I had found myself in. I was in a new world of unknowns, and I didn't know any of the rules, if there were rules at all. It's also just hard to relax with such an ominous space looming just above me, emanating those scratching sounds all day long. What certainly didn't help was that I'd slowly begun to work my way through the fridge, and a fresh batch of bills had piled into the mail. But, much to my surprise, when I came out to check the mail this morning, I found another envelope. It was cream-colored, and the textured paper was very pleasant to touch. When I opened it, I found a check, one from Mr. Cavey to me, and with enough money on it to clear all my worries about bills and groceries. There was a note. "Good job on your first order, Wyatt. For this first order, we're giving you the whole check, but from here on out 30% goes back to us. Keep this up, and you'll have plenty more deposits to look forward to as you clear your debts." I wondered for a moment why someone as powerful as him, or whatever he was representing, would have any need for earthly cash, but I just decided to take my money and shut up. I was also grateful that I wasn't going to be punished for my mistake. And now here I am. I paid all the bills and bought all the fridge essentials: eggs, pizza rolls, almond milk, and beer. The scratching has quieted down a bit, but it's still there. I catch myself wondering if I should try to find some way out of this, to end my relationship with Cavey and all this madness. But something tells me that's not an option anymore. I think after I post this, I'll check on the next order. Maybe keep a lookout in case I'm dumb enough to do another order. Wish me luck, pray for me, or do whatever it is you do. I'll try to get an update on Greg. Story 8. The town smells sweet. You know, when you're flicking through channels late at night, bored out of your mind? With each click of the remote, your eyelids get heavier and you're debating just calling it a night and going to sleep. Then you find it. A cliche dime-a-dozen feel-good movie. It's way too bright. The acting is mediocre at best and the plot is so overused that you can practically predict everything. It's bad, and you know it's bad, but you just can't not watch it. The town is always nauseatingly perfect. Spotless streets with not as much as a discarded piece of chewing gum, countless colorful family-owned shops, and people so friendly that it feels like one big theme park. But it's all a movie set, facades and props, or it usually is. I moved to Barahim about 2 months ago. Yes, I know it's an odd name. My dad pranked me by saying it was in Norway. I almost believed him because I couldn't find it on any US map. Turns out it's just a really small town. When I say that, I mean that it has less people than my old school had students. The only store was a grocery store and a connected gas station with arcade machines. The people that lived in Barahim had lived there for decades, and you'd have better chances at winning the lottery than finding a bus out of town. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't hate this place when I first got here. My mom had us move a lot for her job, so I was used to it. I've stayed in all kind of places, so a small town wasn't a new thing to me. It just surprised me how shiny everything looked. Despite having a vintage feel, nothing looked old or depleted. Houses that looked straight out of an 80s sitcom were in perfect condition. The town had more money than I expected if they could afford all of this upkeep. Our new home was like a life-size dollhouse, a pastel yellow and white exterior with an already flourishing garden. The inside was just as dazzling, with nearly sparkling wooden floors and cozy wallpaper. My brother Tyler scoffed at the place, saying it was way too bright. My parents were immediately infatuated, and Mom started looking through furniture catalogs immediately. We'd moved in the middle of summer, and I still had 4 weeks until school started. As you can imagine, I was extremely bored. I'd already drifted apart from my friends in the last town, and Tyler was too occupied with his games. I ended up going with my dad to the store to pick up a few things to fill the empty fridge. As soon as we pulled into the parking lot, a chill went down my spine. Despite the 80-degree weather, everyone in the parking lot was looking at us, as if we'd pulled up in a luxury car and not an old family van. Eyes bore into the back of my head as we entered the store. I met the gaze of a middle-aged woman. The bag of frozen fruit in her hand had started dripping dew onto the floor as she stared at me. I quickly ducked behind a shelf, never having felt more uncomfortable. My dad was focused on getting groceries, so I stayed in the empty parts of the store. As I walked by the drinks, I noticed how lackluster the selection was. Where you normally see rows upon rows of soft drinks, there was next to nothing. I picked up a glass bottle of cherry red soda, the label proudly displaying that was made and bottled in Barahim. It was nothing I recognized, but every place had their local soda. I put it back, despite how thirsty I'd gotten. Weirdly enough, it didn't look appealing to me. At the front of the store, my dad was talking to the cashier as he bagged our groceries. "This place is so peaceful. You must have had so much fun growing up here," Dad said. The cashier, a guy who looked to be in his late teens, smiled widely and nodded. "Yes, sir. I bet you're going to love it here," the guy said, his attitude peppy, but his stare remained the same as everyone else's. The summer sun burned into my shoulders as I dug the small trowel into the soil of our new front yard. My boredom had spawned a sudden willingness to help my parents with gardening. My dad couldn't resist buying a few flowers to plant, despite the fact that we already had flourishing roses. It was a little bit odd. It didn't look like it had rained for a while, yet the roses of a house that had been for sale were still vibrant and healthy. Maybe the real estate agents just found the gardens to be an important draw. The steel of my trowel plunged into surprisingly soft soil. As I scooped up some of it, the color immediately threw me off. The soil was dark and clumpy, and most confusing of all, It looked wet. It had the sheen of fresh potting soil, and I instinctively brought my head down to get a closer look. A smell filled my nostrils, a syrupy sweetness with an unpleasant undertone of something sharp. It made my stomach twist with how pungent it was. I was about to turn to my dad when I felt a tap on my shoulder. My mom stood there, smiling while holding a tray. She brought it down to me, and I could see it was lemonade. "I know you're bored, honey, but overheating isn't very entertaining." She laughed, and I grabbed the glass closest to me. As soon as the taste hit my lips, I thought I'd bit my tongue. The taste of iron flooded my mouth. The citrus and sugar seemed more like an aftertaste. I told myself that the house's pipes probably hadn't been used in a while, coupled with the fact that the plumbing was probably ancient. I turned my head and spat the lemonade back into the glass. I gritted my teeth and put the cup back on the tray. "Thanks, Mom. I think I'll go inside for now." Boiling the water before drinking it didn't change the taste. Everything still had that persistent metal undertone. I asked my parents about it, and they said they couldn't taste anything. I had to ask an employee at the store if they had any bottled water. He came back with a dusty pallet, but I took whatever I could get. I just couldn't stand that salty iron taste. I took to wandering the town to keep myself busy. It was just as sparkling as our house with perfect, clean streets. The trees decorating the middle of the town square were just as lush as the flowers in our garden. The smell of fresh baked cake wafted through the air as the numerous bakeries and cafes opened for the day. It was overwhelming, and I found myself a little nauseated. What town needed 3 bakeries on the same street? People were staring less. Now they just smile politely when I walked past. Despite how warm they tried to make their smiles seem, they still looked too wide to me, like they were trying too hard. I thought I was just having a hard time adjusting. My family didn't have the same problem. I came home to find Tyler playing catch with my dad in the backyard. Something you need to know about my dad is that he's not the sporty type. I didn't even know we owned any baseball gear. My little brother, who usually preferred to sit inside and play video games, was enthusiastically catching the baseball in his gloved hand. My mom was humming in the kitchen, taking a sizzling roast out of the oven. A pot of mashed potatoes sat bubbling on the stove. She'd always been a terrible cook, yet all the food looked straight out of a cookbook. You're probably thinking it's weird that I'm judging my family for making self-improvements. It's not just that, though. It's the way they talk, too. Their voices were cheerful and almost animated as we ate dinner. Words flurried around me. I couldn't recognize them as the voices of my family. I poked at my perfectly tender roast with my fork as I looked out the window. The flowers we had planted just a few days ago were blossoming beautifully. Their petals so vibrant it hurt my eyes. I finally saw other people my age. There was a group of teens in a field by the tree line leading into the forest. They were having a picnic, laughing and chatting as they drank that bright red soda. I made eye contact with a girl, and she gave that unnervingly wide smile as she motioned for me to come over. "You're the new kid, right? I'm Jane. Do you want to join us?" she asked, patting an empty spot on the checkered picnic blanket. The feeling of unease in my chest was still present, but I'll be honest, I was pretty lonely, and it was starting to overwrite that feeling. I sat down, taking a closer look at the group. The boys were all in neatly ironed polo shirts, while the girls all had flowing summer dresses. I felt way out of place in my old shorts and t-shirt. Jane held out something to me. It was that crimson soda. She'd already opened it for me, the fizzing of the carbonation prickling my ears as the artificial cherry wafted up into my nose. "It's a Baraheem staple. You're gonna love it," a boy said, raising his own half-empty bottle. I tried my best to smile as I began to notice that the earlier chatter had died down. Every pair of eyes were glued to me, looking expectantly. No, they were looking excitedly. Their smiles seemed less like friendly peers and more like grinning hyenas, waiting for their meal, their perfect teeth glistening. I shivered despite the sun on my back. I thought about making an excuse and leaving, but before I could finish that thought, I was already bringing the bottle to my lips. What happened next is going to sound insane, but as soon as the sugary liquid ran down my throat, it was like all my worries fizzled away. I began to notice just how nice everything looked. The perfection that had disturbed me before now made me feel relaxed. The summer breeze carried the sweetness from the bakeries, and I breathed it in. The faces of the kids around me looked friendly again, and I couldn't help but give them all a smile. A smile that wasn't strained, a smile that felt sincere. The peace faded away after a few more seconds, and it was like whiplash. My anxiety creeped back up into my chest, squeezing my heart. I almost wanted down the whole bottle, just to feel that peace again. I turned the soda in my hand and stared at the label containing nothing but its name and the made and bottled in Berahim sticker. As the cherry flavor faded from my tongue, I looked back up at the group. Their red-stained lips were all turned up into those sharp grins again. I excused myself and left the bottle standing in the vibrant emerald green grass. I didn't want to go back into town with the smell of sponge cake and the wide smiles. I didn't want to go back home either to see my family acting exactly like the rest of the town. My gaze fell on the tree line leading into the forest. The ground was soft and a bit wet, despite the aforementioned lack of rain. I moved my feet quickly, so my sneakers wouldn't sink into the forest floor. Once I found a drier spot, I began to notice how tall all the trees were. Their crowns were so thick that they nearly blocked out the sun. As I continued walking, a familiar smell hit my nose. In the beginning, it could almost be mistaken for the smell coming from the multiple bakeries. But as I walked, it turned into the exact same one that had radiated from the soil in our garden. Only this time the putrid sweetness was much stronger and accompanied by a coppery stench, like a slab of meat on the cusp of its expiration date. I felt nausea forming in my throat, but my curiosity made me power through it as I followed the smell until it overtook the air around me. The source of the smell was the biggest tree root I'd ever seen. The mere middle fragment of it sticking up from the ground was easily the size of a bus. It was in a tall arch. I looked around but saw no gigantic tree that the root could have belonged to. The sharp, saccharine smell was almost too much as I got as close as I could without hurling. The bark of the root was discolored and cracking, revealing a reddish gray wood underneath. I got close enough to reach out and place my palm on the root, and my eyes went wide when I felt the slight give of the root's surface. It was soft but ice cold, and when I pulled my hand back, I felt sticky sap coating my palm. I looked at my hand. The substance had a pink tint and a horrible smell. I quickly wiped it off on the denim of my shorts. I walked around the large, decaying root and looked at the crackling surface until I got to the other side. I didn't know much about roots, but I'm pretty sure what I saw couldn't be explained by anyone. On the other side, the bark of the root seemed to be sliding off in a supple, wet mass. It barely clung onto an off-white, smooth branch. That wasn't a branch. The bent look of the root was caused by two rounded ends coming together in a terrifyingly familiar way. I slowly looked down at my index finger and instinctively bent it into an arch. I held it up towards a root. I knew what that sickeningly sweet smell was, and I knew what Berahim stood on. Over the next week, I snuck out at night to dig in the yard of another house with a for sale sign. It didn't take me long because of the soft ground. My shovel finally hit a pipe yesterday, a rusted old pipe that ran down into a gray, leaking mass that stunk of what I found in the forest. It sat alongside numerous other water pipes coming from all directions. They were all buried in the surface of mass. Something protruded from under the surface of the mass, running along the length of it. My grip on the shovel tightened, causing the veins in my hands to pop out. Like I said, finding a bus out of town is nearly impossible, and I'm not even sure that's what I want to do. My family is still here, and I want to get them out too. I have no idea what to do now. I can't look at my own fingers without my body tensing with stress. With every step I take, I think about what's lying and decaying just beneath the town. What I found in the forest was covered up by a heap of dirt when I went back. I found other things too. A large hill on the other side of town with a sickly yellow wall-like structure protruding from the dirt. That was covered up shortly after. Every day, I think about the sweet taste of artificial cherries and the peace of mind it gave me back then. I want to feel like that again. I want to smile again. I want the stench of rotting flesh to disappear behind fresh baked cake and prettily blooming flowers. I want to be able to enjoy spending time with my family again. Even if they don't act like my family anymore, even if they smile too wide and their teeth are too perfect. I want to feel at home. Story 9. Has anyone heard of a town called Dublin? Something strange happened to me today, and I wonder if anyone can shed some light on what I found. I drive a lot for work, small trucks delivering stuff between warehouses owned by my company, but for the most part, I only drive within Ohio and occasionally over the state line to one of our branches in PA. But for the past week, I've been driving cross-country. How did this start? Well, my boss, I'll call him, asked me if I would be willing to fly to New York and pick up a truck there and drive it to Seattle. As weird as that probably sounds, B is a good guy and a great boss, so I agreed. I know him well enough to know it's nothing illegal, and he was offering to pay me double, plus expenses for every day I was on the road. I figured it would take around a week at most, plus he offered to give me the next week off. So I gladly agreed. I got into New York around midnight, and some guy met me with a truck I was to drive at the airport. I drove it to Philadelphia, called me to let him know how far I'd gotten, and then crashed at a cheap motel. Other than the innate oddness of the request, nothing strange happened that night or for the next few after, until I reached Wisconsin. Has anyone ever heard of a town called Dublin? I just passed through, and I don't think it was real. It was getting late, and I was looking for a place to turn in for the night when I saw the turn-off sign for Dublin. The sign said there was a motel in town. So I decided I'd gone far enough and would try and get some sleep, but when I entered town, it was strange, is the only way I can really think to describe it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Go on one of those AI image generators and give a prompt like generic small town American Main Street. See what it spits out? That is what this Dublin place was like. What I mean is that everything looked right at a distance, but it gave off a really strange vibe. And when I got closer, all the small details made no sense. For example, buildings would change material or architectural style, seemingly at random. Some of the doors had no handles, others too many, or in the wrong place. And weirdest of all, the signs were all nonsense. One building had a marquee like an old movie theater that said drug story. Weird spelling of store side. That wasn't that strange, but as I got closer, I saw smaller text underneath it that was unreadable. Just jumbles of letters and numbers that vaguely resembled prices at a distance. Same goes for everything in town. The gas station sign said gas 000 per litre, or at least that's what it looked like. All the letters were misshapen and oddly drawn, like the font they use is designed by an illiterate. I tried to call B and let him know I was stopping for the night then, but instead of ringing or a no-signal tone, I got elevator music like I was on hold. I tried again and the same thing happened. Just bad jazz music. Out of curiosity, I tried a couple more numbers like my girlfriend and the pizza place near where I live. But nothing. Or rather, the same thing, just that music again. Things only got stranger as I drove through town. No people were out. I mean nobody. I didn't see a single human being in town. And the few parked cars I passed were all old boxy sedans. They looked 80s vintage, but none of them had any badges or logos I could see, and all the plates were blank white with black numbers, not real estate plates. The numbers were weird too, just sequential digits in the same bizarre font. Everyone I passed going higher. 01, 02, 03 like that. I never found the motel. I just kept driving until I got out of town, then found my way back onto the interstate and kept going until I reached the next town. Some little place called Cottage where I am now. They had a little all-night diner, and I'm sitting at a booth there writing this now. Thing is, when I asked the locals if they could tell me anything about Dublin, the waitress nearly spilled a pot of coffee, and several old-timers gave me really strange looks. Then they all started talking over each other, assuring me that no such place existed. They know something, and I don't think I'm welcome here anymore. Story 10. When you find the black thread, you're already lost. I don't know if anyone else has experienced something like this. Maybe you have, and you're just too afraid to say it out loud. But I can't stay silent anymore. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It started about a month ago. At first, it was just strange dreams. Nothing out of the ordinary. Everyone has weird dreams sometimes, right? But these were different. These dreams felt real. Too real. Every night, I'd find myself in the same place. A vast, dark, empty space. No walls, no ceiling, no sound, just blackness in every direction. Except for one thing. A thin black thread, hanging down from somewhere far above me. Perfectly still, perfectly straight, almost glowing in contrast to the void. And I couldn't look away. There was something about it, like it was alive, like it wanted me to notice it. And night after night, I would just stand there and stare, frozen in place, until one night, I touched it. That was my biggest mistake. The moment my fingers brushed against it, the space around me shattered. I was suddenly standing in what looked like my apartment. But everything was wrong. It was a mirror version, like everything had been flipped, reversed, familiar and completely alien at the same time. The furniture was where it should be, but it wasn't mine. It looked like cheap imitations, like someone tried to recreate my home from memory and got the texture all wrong. The walls were breathing. I'm not being poetic. They were rising and falling, slowly, like lungs. Something was alive behind them. At first, I thought it was just a dream, a twisted version of sleep paralysis. But then I noticed the shadows. They didn't move with me. They lagged behind, like they were stuck in time, moving slower than I did. They twitched and shimmered, like something glitching out in a video game. And then came the people. People I knew. Family, friends, co-workers. They appeared one by one. But their faces were wrong, distorted, warped like melting wax. Their eyes were hollow, and their mouths didn't move when they spoke. But I still heard them, whispering my darkest fears back at me. They spoke about things no one should know, things I'd buried, things I'd forgotten. They whispered secrets from my childhood, memories I hadn't thought about in years. Each word felt like it was carving something out of me. I couldn't move. The air was thick, like syrup. Every step was a struggle. I was trapped there night after night, and when I woke up, I was exhausted, like I had actually been there physically. No amount of coffee helped. Sleeping pills only pulled me back in faster. Days began to blur together. Reality started to feel as warped as the dreams. Last night, I tried to break the thread. I thought if I snapped it, maybe I could wake up for good. But when I grabbed it, I felt a sharp, searing pain in my wrist. I woke up gasping, and there were bruises on my arm. Deep purple ones. Like something had been gripping me tightly. But I live alone. I've always lived alone. I'm writing this now, half asleep, drained, and desperate. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I don't know how long I've already been stuck in this nightmare loop. But I do know one thing. Every time I close my eyes, the thread is closer. Sometimes I feel it brushing against my neck, even when I'm awake. Please, if you ever find yourself in a dream with a black thread hanging in front of you, don't touch it. Don't follow it. Don't even look at it too long. Because I don't know if I'll be able to post again. And I don't think I'll be the only one it's looking for.